Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In. I'm joined by Mark Ostrander and Grant Turner. We're made possible by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. I should tell you guys the podcast almost didn't happen today. Grant had internet crash on him, and I didn't know if Mark was going to get out of bed after the whooping I laid on him in fantasy football yesterday. So I'm glad we were able to pull it together, boys. Couldn't even get it out with a straight face, Mark. I'm sorry.
Wow. Okay.
He said, okay. All right, let's go.
Grant's in Tokyo, right?
Yep.
Grant's in Iowa, but with a very cool background. If you can't have the real thing on short notice, that's when you're the guy, when you can just pull up stuff like that. So I talked to you guys off the air. I think the next 2 weeks are going to be relatively quiet. You know, then we get into the world championships, and then for us, the college preview stuff, even though there might not be a lot of day-to-day stuff, there'll be a lot for us to talk about. We did have Who's Number One, and I think maybe we should start with that. I'll share screen here. I definitely want to give shout out to Flo for putting together a girls card as well as a boys card. So I think that's awesome. Let's start there once this pops up. Okay, so here we go. So good number of matches. The names that I'm familiar with here, actually a couple of them lost. Estrada, her dad wrestled for us at Merrimack. I'll do this, GT, but no jokes. I'm going to make the font bigger, but no jokes. Okay.
I got it. I get it.
So, Jasmine Robinson, I know people in Texas are super high on her. And then Ava Ward's obviously a Missouri girl, and Rose Cassiope is obviously related to Tony Cassiope. GT, I will say this, and then I'll turn it over to you guys. I am continuously impressed by the level of our younger athletes, period, and women's wrestling improvement in general. And I think this was an event, once again, that showcased those two things. So, Grant, what did you think about it?
You know, I think first and foremost, yeah, once again, big props to Flow Wrestling for the female card. I know that Tony Hager in his Night of Conflict has done that as well, giving a separate night for the female athletes to have a platform for themselves, which is great because it's all inclusive to the event and Who's Number One, which has been a great thing for wrestling right now. But, you know, as far as the girls are concerned, I mean, they shelled out. I think there was and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe one of the first pins in Who's Number One was by a female athlete. So, I mean, once again, historic night for women's wrestling. And yeah, the talent is just crazy coming up through the ranks right now. It's awesome to see. Yeah,
that's my big picture takeaway. Mark, I know you got in between work and got to peek at a couple of these matches. Any other takeaways that you saw from it?
I just think they're improving at such a rapid rate, David. I'm having a harder time watching the levels of the women versus the men, girls versus the boys, because they've caught up so fast to the boys. You see the movement that these young kids are making. And I'm going to talk about the boys right now and the way they can transition from one move to another, their positioning on the mat. You're seeing that just as much in the female wrestling now, which makes it so fun to watch. And that's kind of my big take from it all, is that they've caught up so fast. I mean, we've been wrestling, David, for 100 years. You know, the boys have. The girls just started, and they've already made huge strides to make it so fun to watch. You know, great for Flo to put it on. You know, to put a whole card on for just the women was, you know, they probably wondered if it would work. It worked, and then some. So great for Flo. Great for women's wrestling. Great for wrestling as, you know, a whole. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah, a couple takeaways. I think Hager, GT said it right. We have to give credit to Hager. He did this first. like there's some things we've done first with Border Brawl and some other events, and sometimes people go second and try to take credit. So I'm a little sensitive to that. We got to give Hager credit, and he's doing it again at Night of Conflict in a couple weeks here, separate cards. Obviously, Flow is a huge platform, and they were also, there was that stuff going back when Sarah Hildebrand and Pat Downey and all them talking about Twitter followers versus world medals, and whatever their position was on that, they've come out of it on the other side. And people vote with their feet. It's what you actually do. It's not what you say. So this is a really good thing. I remember when girls were first wrestling, and it was like, no, the guys didn't want to work out with them. The coaches didn't want to coach them. And their only choice was like to sort of fit in, and it wasn't fair. It was really discrimination. Now I think they're seeing the best of both worlds, which is separation in that girls get to wrestle girls, women get to wrestle women, but they get to interact and be coached by men and train with boys, because just like you said, men and boys have been wrestling forever. There's more great coaches that are men now than women, just by quantity, just by how long it's been going on. Women will certainly get that they're more than smart enough in everything else, and probably smarter than us in a lot of ways. But the fact now that they're getting the best of both worlds is, I think, one of the reasons you're seeing the jump. The other reason I think you're seeing the jump is these RTCs. And we've talked about this numerous times. I don't think we're covering any new ground, but just when you get to interact, I know one of Nike's clubs is Pinnacle in Minnesota. And I think about the fact if I had a kid and they could train with Jared Lawrence and Brandon Paulson as their coaches, plus all the guys, like the night I was up there, Luke Becker stuck his head in, Matt Ryder stuck his head in. Like, you could go your whole life and never have those kind of guys coach you even one time. Now you can have these guys coach you 3 days a week. So it's pretty amazing. And I think that's good. I think people learn how to monetize it and monetize their wrestling knowledge. And so kids are getting it earlier and earlier. And that's why we're seeing freshmen in college be so good right away. The boys card or the men's card. So they had one weight class where they, had a 4-man bracket, Rocco Welsh and Rojas, and then Arnold Thompson. And then Welsh and Arnold both won, and Gabe ended up winning the final. I'll just go first. The takeaways for me is like the kids that I'm relatively close to. Luke Lillidahl, he's very good. So for Anthony Knox to be 10-3 over him says a lot. Jordan Williams, another kid I'm close to, that Caleb Henson is for real. Georgia showed out, had 2 kids win. And obviously probably, I don't want to say the surprise of the night, but probably the one in terms of rankings is Swiderski over Mendez in a fantastic match where Swiderski wins 7-6. And then Mark, you and I were talking off the air while Grant was flying in from Tokyo, that the super match, the big guy super match, these are super athletic dudes. And again, you kind of look at the future, because we've talked about college wrestling literally probably 18, 19 weeks of the year on this podcast. You can't help but be excited about seeing all these kids coming in, but these kids with so much skill coming in at this age. So Mark, I'll let you go first. What were your thoughts on the guy's side?
Yeah, Nick Feldman and Christian Carroll was a fun match to watch. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, David, here, or ahead of myself. These are 2 20-pounders. So they're both they're built. They're going to be probably heavyweights, but they're not quite there yet. So it was really fun to see 2 kids that are, 220 going after and brawling, both jacked up, stay in really good position. Christian had troubles getting things going, and then started to get some things going late in the match, just a little bit too late. Mendez was a great match. And some of the stuff you saw was on the edge of the mat. There was a throw there that they didn't give points to, and it was absolutely beautiful. It would have been a 5-pointer in freestyle. I like to see the riding time. I thought that was a neat twist that they added this year to it. Jess Arugo, wrestled Joey Cruz. I know Joey Cruz is a stud, and Nate controlled the match. just a tough kid from Iowa. So that was good. Overall, the talent, this Knox kid is phenomenal out of New Jersey as a freshman.
Yeah.
Bo Bassett is an 8th grader, wrestled the kid out of Illinois, both phenomenal. He's got Bassett has such a good snap and controls all the positions on the mat. And this kid out of Illinois went with them tooth and nail. He was getting snapped, but he'd snap and he'd go right into a leg, and he was able to get his head inside. And he did some really good things to kind of slow him down. But at the end, Bo Bassett was just way too much for him. So these are the kind of, we're talking about 8th graders. When did we ever talk about 8th graders? These guys are phenomenal athletes. I can't even imagine what college is going to look like, David, in another 7 or 8 years when these young kids get up there, because they're so skilled right now. How much better are they going to be by the time they get in college? College wrestling's not going to be the same. It really isn't.
Well, that's the interesting philosophical point, right? Like, you get a kid, like some of these kids that have had the benefit of amazing coaching this whole time, how much better will they improve versus other kids that haven't, and they can make that jump? Like you look at a Jordan Burroughs, a 1-time state champ, and then you look at other kids who are 4-time state champs and then didn't pan out in college. One technique point, one storyline point, and then I'll flip it over to GT. The technique point is about 4 or 5 years ago, USA Wrestling, the coaches at the OTC, and it was trickling down, and we were teaching it here in St. Louis, was to just go with the snap. And you're seeing that, again, sort of permeate wrestling at all levels, but kids with great snaps, unless they snap correctly and sprawl almost at the same time, it's a lot easier on your body. Your neck doesn't get as tired, and the effects of it in the 3rd period are a lot less. You got to be able to get to a leg and then wrestle from there. But even if it's just a stalemate there, that's a lot better than just getting your head bobbed around. A couple of quick storylines. Joey Cruz is an OU commit, and he's also been tooth and nail with Figueroa, who was arguably the best kid in this past year's class. So that tells you where Jessaroga is. Gabe Arnold, Jaden Cox's nephew. So pretty good bloodlines there. A couple of years ago at the OTC, I got to film Gabe and Jaden in like a 2-minute play wrestling match. And I'm like, you know how good Jaden is. And, you flip rolling around. Be nice if your uncle's Jaden Cox. So GT, you work with so many of, the future, these kids in a couple of years later at these college programs. I almost don't I'll just leave it to you. What'd you think?
Well, I think, as Mark kind of alluded to, the guys that we're talking about, like 8th graders or, younger athletes, making these big jumps within their, technique and wrestling career. I'd like to basically promote, the USA Wrestling U15 category. And I think that gives the kids an opportunity to get on a world team and get world exposure at a younger age. So I really truly believe that having that level of competition for those kids to go and be on those teams and experience that will then transition themselves back to, folk style and then collegiate wrestling, and then, ultimately winning world and Olympic titles as they come up through the age group categories. So that U15 is so important, I think, for our development and culture within the US is, hey, go get on a world team when you're young and train and have a purpose. Don't, and once again, we could go into philosophical wrestling debates, but, train hard, but, ultimately, the Tulsa Nationals and, the Reno Worlds and all those, get your matches in, but, continue to get and develop as you grow up. And I think that these kids are doing that at that age gap. As far as, some of these matches, I mean, it was just great wrestling just to watch them. It was just high level wrestling at its finest. It was a great night for the kids, and it was a great night for Flo. I thought the card went as well as it could have, with it, highlights and exposures and, good storylines. So, I mean, cool event, and looking forward to seeing these guys progress.
And a shout out to our boy, Kyle Mankiewicz, for being on the whistle, GT. One of the more fun guys to hang out with. St. Louis guy. His dad's a really good collegiate and high school official as well, has done like Oklahoma State, Iowa. So anytime I can shout out some St. Louis guys, got to do so. So congrats to all the kids that get into this. And I think, GT, what you were saying is right. Like, I think these coaches, these higher level coaches are doing a good job of helping these kids win. And like you're saying, make world teams, get into the who's number one, win Fargo, all these Super 32s, all these kind of things. At the same time, they're helping them improve. And that's a different skill set, right? Like if you can always outside step me, you need to work on other things and practice to get better and not just do the one thing that beats me. And I think these coaches, you can see it because these kids are so multifaceted that that their coaches are saying, don't do your best move today, work on this other thing. And there's a difference between winning and there's a difference between winning and improving. And you can actually be winning and staying stagnant. So I think coaches have figured that out. And it's something that's true in so many walks of life, not just wrestling. So I think that's very cool. Couple of just, I want to say minor notes, but Jesse Delgado, Illinois national champion, fought on the Bellator undercard and got his first MMA win. So congratulations to him. Phil Davis fought Yoel Romero on the main event, and not a super action-packed fight, but Phil Davis took Yoel Romero down several times, which I never thought I would see. So he wins. And then Bo Nickel is making his MMA debut this coming weekend. So just shouts to those guys. I'm going to close. Well, with a couple things, but the next story, and you guys are in Iowa, so I don't know how big of a story this is. I'm just seeing it on social a lot. I saw a really funny hypothetical text message between the wrestling coach and the Iowa football coach and Brands about Ben Keeter, that he's committed to Iowa for both sports. So I will tell you this, I pronounced his name Cuter 2 months ago when I was doing the junior dual final. So I am by no means a Ben Keeter expert, but I was sitting next to a couple dads that filled me in. Obviously, I was looking up his stats on the fly. Obviously, a top flight wrestler, not a huge kid, but very good at football as well. So GT, I mean, obviously these, like we're talking about all the evolution thing, the graphics of, him going both sports. He's a kid with a pretty high ceiling. And Mark and I were going through Iowa's lineup. They're going to probably start 8 seniors this year. So they obviously have a lot of talent in the room, but they need to keep recruiting because after next year, they're going to have to reload. It's going to not be a rebuild, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, he's a local guy. So I'm not surprised that he's committed to the Hawks. He is a big kid. So, I mean, like he's only going to get bigger, especially if he's going to do, the kind of the football and wrestling aspect, which I haven't seen anybody in a non-heavyweight role ever do the dual athlete thing. I mean, for a long time. I don't know if I could, maybe other aspects or other sports may have a dual athlete, but for football and wrestling,
yeah,
at a non-heavyweight weight class, you'd have to be hard pressed. I would love to, put it out there for Twitter to see who would be the last guy to do that. But yeah, this kid's tough. Excited for the Hawks to get someone of his caliber too. Keeping a local kid there. Yeah, exciting.
And the dads that were sitting next to me were talking about what a good young, I don't want to call him a kid, but a good young man he is, and, living life the right way. So nice get for the Hawks. I know, Mark, you don't like Iowa wrestling at all, so you're probably not at all excited about this, right?
No, I was kind of disappointed. I thought he might go somewhere else, but no, it's great. And I agree with Grant. I don't know of anybody that has been able to do those 2 sports that has not been a heavyweight, because it is different. There's so much time and training, and football takes, you're in football all the way into January almost these days, and he's not going to see the mat until, the season's half over, unless they decide to switch the season to second semester sport, which we could see in the near future. I don't know. I like it the way it is, but that's because I'm old and I'm used to things that way. So, but yeah, great for Iowa to get a guy like that. I don't know if he's a world beater coming in. I don't know if he's top tier guy. I don't know that much about him. I know he wrestled in the junior duels, did pretty well. Maybe lost a match here or there, but
He's a
yeah.
top 20 guy nationally, so he's good.
Okay. All right.
I think the realistic thing is he's not going to play. I mean, I think I looked at the rankings. Iowa's ranked like number 5 in football this week. So, you know, and they're perennially like between like 15 and 25, 15 and 30 in there. I mean, they're always going to a bowl game. It's usually not a New Year's Day game. I don't mean that disparagingly or complimentary. I think that's a fairly accurate assessment of that. You know, they're usually not playing Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, but they're always in a bowl game. They're usually 8-4, 9-3, that kind of thing. So like you're saying, he would probably not flip over till around Jan 1. I think the most realistic version of this is, you know, that he doesn't do both for all 4 or 5 years, right? Like he figures out which one he's better at and goes that route. I know football's got a lot more scholarships than wrestling does. So if he's either a walk-on on one of those sports, because if you get a football scholarly, you're full. And, you know, and then I think he probably has, and we don't ever talk about he probably has some cool NIL stuff, right? Like, you know, you put on a helmet and a singlet, you know, like, or, you know, like football tights and a headgear, and there's probably some cool cross-selling opportunities there. So, you know, that might help him a ton too. But
I know David, I do know that Iowa's done a little bit of basketball and baseball because Fran McCann is the head basketball coach at Iowa. One of his sons was doing both. So it happens, but I mean, we're talking contact sports compared to non-contact sports. It's going to be hard to do both for 5 years. It really is. And I hope he's able to do it.
It's just cool that he's talented enough that they both want him. So,
sure.
GT, it looked like you were going to say something. I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I think it's, you know, to Mark's point, you know, with Iowa going into the postseason in football, I mean, once again, if he's a red shirt or if he's a, you know, maybe like a special teamer, maybe he can make that transition a little bit to wrestling. But, you know, once again, kudos to him. I mean, once again, that just goes to show like what kind of an athlete is getting recruited by 2, you know, basically top 5 programs nationally currently. So like, that's really, really cool to see.
Nerd alert question. Can you redshirt in one sport and wrestle and compete in the other sport in the same year and then flip-flop? Do you guys know that answer? Because I don't. Like, for example, you can. So he could redshirt in football this next, like, let's say the wrestling team knew they needed him next year. And I was obviously not a team that probably, they're so good, but let's just say like they go, we need him. And the football team goes, okay, we'll redshirt him this year. He can go wrestling the full year. And then the next year we're going to redshirt him in wrestling and flip over. He can do that?
Yes.
Okay.
2 different sports.
That might be the solution for 2 years to figure that out. So.
Grant, I am correct, aren't I?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've dug deep into that, and especially now with the post like COVID 1 year gap where like everybody got a bye for that season. Yeah. I believe Mark is correct. I believe that you can burn up eligibility in one sport, but it's still part of your 5 years to complete 4.
Yep.
So it's a clock issue rather than maybe like a red shirt burning eligibility issue. You know, so I think, and once again, I haven't done a lot of Division I, you know, compliance officer stuff, but I think Mark is correct in that assessment.
Well, the other thing I know in football is you can play 3 or 4 games. I don't know what the number is and still be a red shirt too. So, you know, it's not like wrestling. I know a lot of wrestling people would like to see that where you could wrestle in a couple duels, but anyway, it's a story we'll follow. Okay. So there's 2 things left to talk about. I want to definitely get to the Carter Young situation because I actually firsthand found some stuff out. And then if we have time, we can touch on world championships because next week we'll probably get into that pretty hot and heavy. And then Grant, you'll be on your way to Oslo probably shortly after that. I want your travel miles account, GT. That's all I want. And your hairline. Well, those are the 2 things I'd like. So
perfect.
Anyway.
Does Grant need me to carry his luggage to, you know?
The pandas
love that.
I'm gonna need
Omaha's
a-
already on, I'm already on the short list for that. So,
one small bag you're allowed, Grant, because I can't carry too much anymore.
all right, so Carter Young. So let's set the table here. He is an incoming freshman, had committed to Northwestern. He was, I think somebody had him ranked number 11 overall. If they could have redone the rankings after him, who he just beat, he's got to be top 5 at what he did at the 61 kilo world team trials. They beat Garrett, Gross, and Tyler Graff, I believe. I think I have that right, but placed 3rd. Okay, so insane tournament. So I think Willie, I don't know where I saw it first, so I apologize if I'm giving the wrong person credit, tweets out Carter Young is going to Oklahoma State. Carter Young is from Stillwater High School in Stillwater, Oklahoma. If you've never been to Stillwater, the high school and Gallagher-Iba Arena are about, what, GT, 6 minutes apart, something like that?
Yep.
Door to door, okay? He's been training over at Oklahoma State his whole life, okay? I don't know how Northwestern got him. So I see this. I text a member of the Oklahoma State coaching staff. I'm going to read to you what these say so I don't misquote anything. And then we can get into this. I said, you got Carter Young, exclamation, question mark. Yes, sir. Wow. How did that happen? We were just told there were some changes at the Northwestern staff. And then I said, hadn't he signed an NLI? And he had an insane world team trials. Then I get a call from the coach. Okay. So a couple things to break down here. First of all, I don't know how this happened, but when Carter Young went into the portal, Oklahoma State's compliance department checked his NLI with Northwestern had never been turned in. So people could have been calling him the whole time. Junior colleges do this all the time, by the way. They wait till like the day before school to turn them in, just in case something pops up. Certain junior colleges do this. But this has to be an error and a mistake at Northwestern, because, I mean, Carter Young was a huge recruit for them. Okay, so Oklahoma State finds out we're compliant. We can just reach out to them. They make a deal. So and I apologize being long-winded, but I got to set the table for this for everybody so then you guys can comment on it and everybody kind of knows, because I talked to you guys about this off the air. Let's just start about what it does for Oklahoma State. I think he's the starter at 41. Okay. To me, that makes sense. It's either him or G. You know, G's had some struggles there. He's a super high level incoming kid, got a lot of momentum. You have Mastro, Dayton, him, probably Victor V, Sheets, Whitlake, Plot, Gear, Ferrari, and then either Harris or Serber. Pretty salty lineup. Okay. They get to keep a kid in town. He doesn't cost them as much money because he's an in-state kid. Obviously, he was a really good student, so he might have gotten some academic money, whatever the case may be. So the second piece is I can't believe Northwestern didn't have his NLI done. Third thing is there are changes at the coaching staff that, at least according to my source, Northwestern required their coaches to get vaccinated by 5 p.m. Friday, and if they didn't, they were terminated. And according to my source, Jimmy Kennedy and Andrew Howe didn't get vaccinated. So if that's the case, let's talk about we'll set the table, and then there's gonna be a lot for you guys to talk about. But now Northwestern is short 2 assistant coaches on September 20th, which is terrible. Matt Storniolo, one of the best young coaches in the country, obviously at a huge recruiting disadvantage with how selective Northwestern is academically and how expensive the university is, has done a great job there. And then let's talk about the most likely destinations for Jimmy Kennedy and Andrew Howe, because I'm pretty sure they're not retiring. Andrew Howe to Michigan makes all the sense in the world. Super close guy with Sean Bourmet, still a great coach. And they have an opening with Kellen Russell, having gone to Cornell. Jimmy Kennedy, his sister is married to David Taylor. I certainly think it makes sense for him to either go out to M1 or go to the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, because they don't officially have a club coach at Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. That's just Kale and Casey and Cody. I don't know where you guys want to start with this because there's so many layers. Mark, I'll let you go first. What do you think about any of it?
Well, I guess I'm going to look at it a little different. And remember, we said this at the beginning of the podcast. This is my opinion and my opinion only. I don't go with what you think, David. I don't go with what Grant says. I'm going to say what I think. I think what happened with the assistant coaches at Northwestern was a travesty. I think that if you know to be part of that program, you got to get a vaccine. And a lot of colleges now are requiring vaccine for even the students to get enrolled in classes. So they knew it was there. And they recruited these kids and said, I will be your coach. I will be your assistant coach. And we both know, David, and I'm sure Grant knows too, that assistants do a lot of the recruiting. Those are the guys that are on the mat every day with these kids. The head coaches out there are getting older. We have so much responsibility to run the whole program. We're not on the mat every day. Kevin Dresser does not go work out every day in the wrestling room. Tom Brands hasn't went a 2-hour session with a kid probably in a long time, and we used to do that when we were younger. We used to wrestle all day long with the kids. So just to not, right at the beginning of the season, David, not to get vaccinated and to walk away from a program where you made promises to kids, you made promises to the head coach, it puts him in a really tough situation. I don't know everything that's going on there. I just know the head coach at Northwestern's done a phenomenal job. He's got a really good program. He's got kids that could be in the finals next year. He's got a couple of them for sure that should be in, for sure could be in the finals next year. They're going to be a top 10 team if that happens, because they're going to have 4 or 5 All-Americans, maybe 2 in the finals. That's in this year of wrestling, which is like any other year, not like any other year we've ever seen, is that, 5 All-Americans and 2 in the finals, you're going to be top 10.
Yeah. So I want to just make sure your point is that it's a travesty that the coaches didn't get vaccinated. I'll just counterpoint this and then flip it over to Grant. Maybe when they recruited the kids, they didn't know they were going to have to get vaccinated. And then people have their own choices on how they feel about the vaccine. I have my own opinions, and I had COVID and pneumonia on top of each other for 4 weeks straight. And I'm sure my opinion can't agree with everybody else because the country's completely torn on it.
Sure.
GT, maybe less about the vaccination side of it and more about the fallout, A, to Oklahoma State and B, to Northwestern, and then the other 2 possibilities.
Well, I think, as you watched Carter Young wrestle at the senior level at, 61 kg, beating some tremendously accomplished names in that bracket. It's tough to see Northwestern lose an athlete of that caliber to then go back home. Kudos to Oklahoma State. They just got a lot better. And I truly believe that Carter Young at 61 kg, I don't think he's going to be at 61 kg any longer. I think that kid's going to grow. He's going to get bigger.
And Dayton Fix is on your team at 61 kg.
Well, if you just look at Carter, like he's a tall drink of water at 61. Yeah. So I think potentially, 41, 49 by the time that guy is, through his collegiate career. I think that's
65,
where he
right? Probably 65 internationally would be a perfect weight for him, right?
And, and Mark can attest to this, 4 years on a college athlete, a lot of things can change. You could recruit him at a 33 pounder and all of a sudden he's a 97 pounder. There's crazy stories out there. And if he hangs out with Hayden Zilmer, he'll be a heavyweight by the time he's done with his collegiate career. I think that on the wrestling side is very cool to see for Okie State. It's not advantageous to lose a recruit like that, especially for, somewhere like Northwestern that does have, a higher maybe academic standard than, some of the other state schools. Your talent pool to have, that kind of a level of education and also wrestling talent combined. And then, losing 2 of your assistant coaches due to a policy of the school is another hit to the program. So for Matt, trying to replace coaches that would then adhere to the university policies. I'm sure that there's a line out the door of people that want to go coach wrestling at the University of Northwestern, or Northwestern University, I should say.
Yeah.
So stinks right now. Could be an open door for a couple of new guys to come in. And Jimmy Kennedy and Andrew Howe, they're going to find jobs. They're going to find somebody to pick those guys up. They're tremendous talent, great coaches. So somebody's going to pick those guys up, and they're going to get really better really quick.
Yeah. So just a couple personal notes for me. Jimmy Kennedy has donated stuff to my charity event. Couldn't be nicer, and I barely knew him at the time. So, a lot of respect for him. Andrew Howe has done some stuff with Beat the Street Chicago on the same platform that I was at. So really nice guy. Like you said, GT, they're not going to be out of work. The only reason they'd be out of work is if everywhere they go, they're going to be required to get vaxxed and they refuse to do that. I think that's the only scenario that is the case. And, that's theoretically possible. I just don't think that that's probably very likely. I think you see Oklahoma State obviously get stronger for this. Potentially Michigan could get stronger, and Penn State, God bless them, they need the help. They could potentially get stronger. So, the strong get stronger in this scenario. I think we all agree on this. It's good, like when a Northwestern, when a Stanford, when these super high academic schools are good at wrestling, it's good for our sport. It helps beat the meathead stereotype out there. I remember like when Jesse Jansen won nationals, like a guy from Harvard wrestling like this really smart style, like these kind of guys, it's good. Like, Shane Griffith literally saved probably 9 sports last year, like when they saved wrestling, they had to save the other one sort of really, so, the impact that a kid like that can have is insane. So Storniolo is a really smart guy. He'll figure it out. I'm sure at the very least he's frustrated, and the very most he's pulling his hair out, but we've all coached when stuff didn't go the way it was supposed to. And usually that's out of our control. Stuff just happens and they'll bounce back. But it's a very interesting thing to follow. I think that's it for this week. We're just about out of our time. Thank you guys as always for watching, listening, and sharing, and we'll be back next week.